Hey guys, it's Miss Cogsall. I had this idea the other night that I was going to read the rest of Homeless Bird to you guys, but I don't have a book, so I had to download it on my extremely old school Kindle, and I'm going to read it to you guys. So we were right in the middle of chapter 4, so I'll do a quick recap over chapter 4, and then I'll get started. And I'm also going to post some activities on Schoology for you guys to do so we can finish the book, even though we won't be together. And I miss you guys, by the way, like a whole lot. So chapter 4 started off with Sass and Coley going to the city, and they applied for something which we all pretty much figured out was some kind of pension that Sass is taking from Coley. So they did that. And Sass is growing more and more bitter, so she's making Coley work even harder, and she's yelling at her all the time, making her do all these chores. Sorry, I'm looking around. So then she compares her to the Bandicoot, which is that big rat thing underneath the porch. And so to comfort herself, she began a quilt, and she's doing it about Hari. So she's embroidering all kinds of things about Hari. Then they go to the Holy Festival, which is where they throw the cow pee and poop all over each other. We talked about that. Let's see. So then when they got home, she was quilting again. So I'm going to start right here in the middle of chapter 4. And, I'll try to show you guys the words, I guess, too. I don't know if I can do that. I'm not very skilled. You know what? You're just gonna have to watch me read, if that's okay. So maybe I can figure this out later. But I'm just gonna read to you guys, okay? So we're right in the middle of chapter 4, and I'll stop at the end of chapter 4, and we'll go from there. When the hot weather came, I worked on the quilt in the courtyard, hoping for a little breeze. Day after day, the heat pressed down on us. I longed to be like the turtles in the dried-out streams, hidden in the mud, waiting for the rains to give them life again. Chandra loved to watch me embroider. Your needle makes the pictures come alive, she said. I can teach you, I offered, but Chandra only shook her head. I'd rather watch you, she said. Chandra was not lazy, but just a little spoiled. She was allowed to sleep later than I was in the morning, was given more food to eat, and had fewer tasks than I did, always the easier ones, like airing the quilts and the pillows. Still, I cannot be angry with her for the way Sass treated me. Chandra was willing enough to help me, but she gave little thought to a task. She was always dreaming of something else, the shape of the clouds or the color of the sari she had seen in the marketplace, or most often the husband she would have one day. I sometimes teased her for her daydreams, but I was happy to have her for a sister. If Sass scolded me, Chandra would find an excuse for me. When she was given some treat to eat that was not given to me, she would secretly save some and give it to me when we were alone. Chandra had tied a rope to the mango tree, knotting the end. When Sass was busy elsewhere, we hung onto the rope and swung ourselves into the treetops. The best part of the days were the afternoons, when Chandra and I had the courtyard to ourselves for our baths. We took turns pouring pails of water over each other. We would unwind our saris. Only then, as the cool water washed over me, could I forget Sass's scalding words in the fiery sun. We would put on fresh, dry clothes, making sure all the while that no parts of our bodies showed, as to preserve our modesty. I sometimes looked into Hari's room. The bugs had dried up and fallen on the floor. Their butterflies had lost their color. His room was now used to store flour and lentils. A stray cat often slept there. It would gaze at me with its sly brown eyes, just as Hari had done. One of Hari's school books still lay on the trunk. No one touched the book, and day by day the dust grew on it. Though I could not read, I sometimes opened the book and looked at the words. They were the words that Hari had known. I thought it would be a fine thing to have a book of my own. No one seemed to want it, and I began to think of asking for it, wondering if such a request would be met with a new round of scoldings. One evening I gathered my courage and went to Sessur. I blurted out, "May I have Hari's school book?" Sessur always seemed surprised to find that I was still there. After staring at me for a moment, he said, "It would fetch only a rupee or two in the marketplace. Take it, but what will you do with it? Can you read?" I shook my head. I thought if I turned the pages over and over, I might learn. I expected Sessur to laugh at my foolishness, and instead he gave me a long look. For the first time since Hari's death, I saw his smile. Say nothing to your Sass, but come to me each evening when she's talking in the courtyard with the neighbor women. I'll help you to learn to read and write. That night I could not keep the happy news to myself. Chandra, I whispered, your BAP is going to teach me to read. You can learn as well. Chandra shook her head. I could never learn such things. Yes, you could. I have no need. My parents are looking for a husband for me. After that, I went each evening to my Sasur. He showed me how each little word is like a little package of letters. He was clever with a pencil. For each letter, he drew a picture of some creature, a hawk or a pig, and I printed its name below the letter. When I had all the letters, he drew a railway. The engine pulled several words so that now I had a sentence. Page by page, I learned the secrets in the book. What was even more exciting, Sasur told me there were many books, each one with a story in it. And as the months went on, he gave me some of those other books to read. Chandra and I were not allowed oil to light our room at night. In order to read the books, I had to take them with me, hidden in my sari, when I went to wash in the clothes in the river. I hurried to finish the washing so I would have a little time with my book. I looked forward to those walks to the river, for I was walking away from Sass and her scolding. It was June and hot summer now. The dry bamboo leaves rattled in the wind. Puffs of dust exploded with my every step. Along the road I saw women winnowing baskets of threshed grain in the wind, the clouds of chaff flying off in the breeze. The mustard fields were golden with blossoms and smelled fragrant when I walked by them. In this dry season, only a trickle of muddy water remained in the river. Though I rubbed the clothes on the stones to get them clean, the clothes sometimes looked even dirtier when I was finished. Still, I loved the river. Sometimes a tiny silver fish would leap from the water after a fly. Hawks circled overhead. Bright green dragonflies wove in and out of the reeds. A kingfisher perched on the peepul tree, its red breast like a tongue of fire. I washed the dust off my bare feet and splashed the water over me for coolness. I thought of how Hari had splashed me in the Ganges. I wondered what my life would have been like as Hari's wife. I knew that Hari had been spoiled and would not have been easy to live with, yet I was sure I would have been happier than I was now. There were days at the river when I did not pick up my book, but only daydreamed like Chandra. I imagined myself returning to my village, to my ma and Bap and my brothers. I wanted to picture welcoming looks on their faces when they saw me come back to them in my widow's sari. As hard as I tried, I could not put such looks on their faces, nor could I feel their welcoming embraces. Instead, I saw them all lined up in the courtyard, frowning and cross. I heard them order me back to the home of my husband's parents. It's where you belong now, they would surely say. Sometimes I would picture myself running away, selling my earrings to get a railway ticket to Varanasi. I thought of the excitement of the city. But what would I do for a living and where would I stay? I remembered all the families living on the streets. And though I turned these things over and over in my head, I did not see how I could escape. As the summer days grew hotter and hotter, Chandra and I would stand in the courtyard every afternoon looking up at the sky, waiting for the rains to cool us. One day, just as we had given up hope, huge gray clouds, large and clumsy as elephants, came rolling in. A moment later, 1,000,000 pails of water emptied on us. Holding hands, we danced and danced, tipping our heads up and opening our mouths. Our clothes clung to us, and under our feet the dry dust of the courtyard softened and into mud and squeezed up between our toes. Even Sass forgot her scolding and stood a little apart in the courtyard, letting the rain fall on her as if it were washing away some of her sorrow. Now that the monsoon had come, everything was damp. The quilts on our beds and the clothes on our chests were limp and smelled of mildew. Overnight, our sandals turned green with mold. In every room, water dripped down from the ceiling, so when we had a hard rain outside, it was like a small rain shower inside. The mud brick walls of the house became even thinner, and a part of our roof caved in. Overnight, the wilting wheat and mullet fields turned green. Mosquitoes bred in the little pools along the roadside. We could not walk very far without snakes for company. They were everywhere, hanging from the mango tree and crawling under our charpoys so that we were afraid to sleep. Sasur had to come to our room with a big branch and beat the invading snakes to death. Though we were refreshed by the rain, there were still scoldings from Sass. Either I didn't rub the clothes hard enough to get them clean, or I rubbed them so hard they were worn thin. One day, she accused me of putting too much water in the rice, so that it was like gruel. The next day, she said I did not put enough water, and the rice was dry as dust. If I answered back, I was impudent. If I kept silent, I was sullen. I saw that no matter how hard I worked, I could never please her. At the end of the summer, Krishna's birthday was celebrated. It was a national holiday, and Sasur took Chandra and me into the village to see the fireworks. The colors exploded like handfuls of petals tossed into the sky. There were trained monkeys and clever starlings that had been taught to talk. There was a man who rode a bicycle on a tightrope and a snake charmer whose cobra was so old and lazy it could not be coaxed from its basket and had to be tumbled out. Sasur gave us a few coins to buy a cone of spun sugar. We ate half and laughed at how our faces were sticky all over with the pink sugar. Though Sasur was kind to me and had taught me to read, I could not ask him for help. He left early in the morning for school and came home with papers to correct. He was paid very little for his teaching and often appeared troubled. "Is the teaching very hard?" I once asked him. "The teaching would be nothing, but my students are rude and disrespectful. They hide my glasses so that I cannot see the lesson. Last week they put a scorpion on my desk. How could that be? They should be grateful to you." He smiled at me. Coley, I only wish my students were as anxious to learn as you are." Sasur suffered from more than the students' tricks. When he was home, Sass was always complaining about how poor they were and how others were better off. I think Sasur was as miserable as I was. The only time my Sasur seemed to come alive was when he had a book in his hand. Now that I could read, he often took out a book of poems by the great Indian poem Rabindranath Tagore. The book had a fine leather cover with its title in gold letters. The inside covers had fancy colored paper on them. The most impressive thing was Tagore's own signature in his book. "He signed the book for Maibap," Sasur said. Maibap went to hear him give a reading of his poems. "The book has been handed down from son to son, but now..." He sighed, and I knew he was thinking of Hari, so I began to read aloud to Sasur from my favorite poem. It was about a flock of birds flying day and night through the skies. Among them was one homeless bird, always flying to somewhere else. One day, Sass caught us at our reading. She was very angry. "What are you teaching that girl?" she cried. "It's no wonder she forgets to do her work." Sass was suspicious of the books, treating them as if they were scorpions that might try to sting her. From then on, if she caught me reading, she would call me lazy and send me to a task or send me off to the village for an errand. But no matter what Sass thought, the secrets in the books were now mine, and try as she might, she could not snatch them away. I still bowed to the household shrine each morning, but now I begged Krishna to find a way to let me escape. In my books I had read that as a child, Krishna was very mischievous as well. The milk I churned would not turn into butter. The grain I found for chapatas had a bit of chaff that got between our teeth. In the garden, I pulled up the potato plants and left the weeds. The dung cakes I made fell apart, so the fire went out. I put a dead frog in the water bottle. The bottle was brass, so no one noticed the frog until all the water had been drunk. I left the geese's mess where Sass would step into it. I looked away when the bandicoot ate the mangoes. I'm going to have to pause because my kids are calling for me. Hang on a second.